from a technology perspective, tools like Salesforce just gives me the data I need at my fingertips.
Today I'm here with Kevin Mulraine. Kevin, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, man, thank you.
Yeah, I was really excited to have this interview with you, and I'd love to start this off by having you just give an introduction of your background in sales and sales management, and just a little bit about the course that you've gone through over your career before we jump into some questions.
Sure. So I've been in sales now for almost 15 years. Very early on in my career, I knew that I wanted to take a path towards sales, management, coaching, leadership. I knew just my passion was so much more on helping, I think, those around me. Early on, I was able to kind of progress into a sales management role. Very much a sink or swim, figure it out kind of environment, which was crazy. But as you look back on it, right, you're better for it. So, but I was able to kind of go from individual contributor to sales manager, to opportunities where I was really building out and trying to scale revenue organizations. This is my third stint as a VP of sales role.
How you progressed from that sort of point in time into the VP of sales role, and how you've seen things change over the years in terms of the way that you manage sales teams, specifically in the way that you're looking at analytics, KPIs, and software and technology to get an edge in over your competition.
Sure. So I think for me, even as an individual contributor, it was, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it, right? So leveraging technology, leveraging analytics, it was, we need to be able to measure certain points throughout our entire sales process and really highlight and define those inflection points of conversion. And if we can measure those things, it's not to play big brother, make sure you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. It's really being able to identify those coaching moments, right? It's really being able to identify how you're moving through your sales process, because every single sales rep, even the top performing sales reps, are going to operate and perform very differently through the funnel. So if you can identify how someone is converting and how they're performing, you can pretty quickly identify, here's where we need to optimize, here's how we can get better. Or if you're seeing, hey, they're converting extremely well here, how do we lean into that more? So to me, the analytics piece of it was always sort of my North Star of direction with coaching, optimizations, and from a technology perspective, tools like Salesforce, even the growing technology today, it just gives me the data I need at my fingertips.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting, around or a little bit before that time, I myself made a transition from working in private equity to working in technology. And in private equity, I worked with a lot of people that were naturally great salespeople, great relationship managers, great presenters, really understood their product and their market, but definitely not data-driven people by and large.
Yeah.
And I came to Salesforce, and I think from an outsider's view, I thought, wow, they're going to be so data-driven and so analytical, and they're going to help me uncover best practices. And to some extent that was true, but when it wasn't, the irony is I was also worried about that big brother mentality. And what I found is they weren't like that at all. But what I was looking for is, how can I get insights as a rep to improve my day-to-day?
Yeah.
Like, I wanted my management team to come to me and say, Eddie, we've analyzed the data, we've analyzed your territory, we've analyzed your sales activities, we've analyzed this, that, and the other, and here are the insights that we can glean from that. Here is a better way for you to tackle your territory. Here's a better way for you to approach the way that you sell. Here are the things that, the areas where you are not performing as well as others, and things that you might want to start working on. And then, the qualitative aspect of it, here's how we can coach you to try to improve in those areas.
Yes. Yeah.
And to some extent I saw that, and to some extent I still felt like there was room for improvement there.
I think, I think the whole big brother, you're just trying to track what I'm doing. Part of it is people are always going to have a sense of feeling that way. I think, I knew for me personally, and again, I always tried to, as a manager, I always put myself in the rep shoes, because I was there one day, right? And I knew how I liked to be managed, how I didn't like to be managed. And every rep likes to be managed differently, right? But for me, when I'm trying to hire and build a team, one of the things that's super important is hiring reps that are very accepting and seeking feedback, right? So I think if you have a culture of feedback and looking to get better and are very coachable, kind of minimize that big brother thing, because this is just part of it. And as a rep too, if if I received constructive criticism, when a manager was able to say, and we think this because, and they could sort of explain the why behind the call the judgment, right? Then I was like, okay, cool. Like, no, that makes sense, right? And I think it comes into the communication. If you are communicating very Big Brotherish, or you're rewarding on Big Brother type mentalities like call quotas, email quotas, right? Anyone can get to 50, 60, 70, 150 calls a day. I can do that, sure. But is that really what's going to be the behavior that's going to drive to the outcome I'm looking for, right? So I think that's like one of the big things is like, I don't care about that, like the activity stuff. I care about it because it's going to produce a result, and seeing the activity to the result is going to help us understand like what's going on. But I think you have to go look at it in a full picture. You can't just zoom in on one specific metric to say this dictates everything. So having a more holistic view on performance and metrics is going to really help you shape a fuller story on where you can optimize and coach.
And I wanted to ask you to kind of go back to that time when we met and talk through that transition, but I also wanted to ask you the kind of things that you're measuring today. So I don't know if you want to answer that as two separate questions or one, but I'd love to hear sort of like how you've grown over the last 5-6 years in terms of like those types of things, of what you're looking at, the KPIs that you feel are most important, that kind of thing.
Well, I think to be honest with you, when we first met, there was definitely an element of let's capture like the vanity metrics, like let's capture the activity stuff, which again I think is important. But what I wasn't necessarily tracking so much was that activity to outcomes, right? And I think benchmarking certain conversions throughout your sales process is really what I think is probably the most stark difference for me, because that is going to tell a much more of an impactful story, right? And a much more meaningful story when you can coach and optimize a conversion versus a static metric, right? So I think that's one of the big differences. The other difference I'd say is today, like I mentioned before, I'm reporting on the holistic performance, and I'm doing it in a view where I can see the holistic performance in front of me. So this way I can see how leads are converting by rep. I can also see how they're converting into opportunities, and then see how they're progressing through opportunity stages. So this way, it's really giving me a full, transparent view of how the performance is going and what those conversions look like. And then you have obviously benchmarks that you can take a look at through your revenue model, and then you start to kind of customize that based on how each individual rep is performing. So I think the stark difference for me and how I've evolved over the last couple of years is probably looking much more towards meaningful metrics that drive more towards outcome versus just vanity metrics. When I first started working with you, it was, to an extent, it was like, build this stuff out, like build out the foundation to our sales team. Let's figure out the reporting, the dashboards, the metrics, the forecasting tools. And I was like, all right, let's go figure it out, right? Like I didn't have someone sort of showing me the light and the best practices and ways of doing it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I would love to hear if you could like walk me through it, maybe not a super high level, but maybe a medium high level, what that sales process is for you today, and the specific conversions that you're looking at, and maybe how you've optimized that over the last 12 months.
Yeah, great question. So we're looking at everything. So like from an inbound perspective, for instance, we're taking a look at how many leads hit the top of our funnel, how many of those actually hit a threshold of scoring to become an MQL, all the way down to sales accepted lead. Our definition there is really once a sales rep owns it and has started doing outreach. So we have some automation rules built into SalesLoft that help us capture that in real time. Then we're taking a look everywhere from sales accepted lead to what's converting into scheduled demo calls, how those demo calls convert to qualified and then actually enter our pipeline. We're also measuring the pipeline velocity. So once something hits our pipeline, how fast and efficiently is it moving through the different stages? So we have reporting, for instance, that will show us opportunities without activity over a certain period of time, opportunities over a certain age, as well as opportunities that are sitting in the stage for a certain period of time, because those are just like the warning signs for us, like, hey, this might be an opportunity at risk. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean it is. There might be a perfectly great explanation for it, but these are just proactive ways for us to get opportunities in front of management where we can kind of insert ourselves and start to help and figure out what's going on there. Looking at our conversions to obviously all the way through the funnel to close one. That's kind of where, for just my remit today, sort of ends is solely on the new business side of things. But I think the two biggest points of the process that I'm looking to convert is from sales accepted lead to qualified opportunity of what's hitting our pipeline. So are we becoming more efficient with the leads that we're getting and creating more pipeline out of the same sort of count? And then finally, because of that, are we also going to see an increase in conversions from qualified to closed won, right? So we know how we're performing there. We have a benchmark. We're measuring the reps against those. So we've done structural changes, training, coaching, partner with marketing more effectively. There's a lot that's gone into it. So there's a lot of new things we're doing this year, and we're gonna obviously we're measuring, and it's too soon to tell, but we're optimistic. We're gonna start to see improvements as we go.
So what are your thoughts on, there's a lot of people, especially on LinkedIn right now, talking about the idea that marketing should really be measured by revenue and not necessarily just marketing qualified leads. I'm really curious what your opinion is on this.
See, that's a great question. And I don't know if I have like a bold statement or opinion just yet. What I do know is that I think the silos need to be removed more and more, right? Like I think that sales and marketing definitely need to be aligned much closer. They're always going to have those, we're generating the best MQLs, but you guys can't close. And then the closer's going to say, we're closers, but you don't know how to generate leads. Like there's always going to be that element to it. So definitely having some shared metrics for better alignment, that's a great thing. I do have empathy for marketers, because I do understand that they could do a hell of a job, but eventually they're no longer in control, right?
Yeah.
I think when you start to put people measured, especially on a performance, and then even if that's tied to a compensation level, to something they can't control, you're going to end up having individuals or teams that are just going to be frustrated, right? I would be frustrated if I was measured on something that I can't control. So I'm definitely empathetic to it as a salesperson. I'm also like, no, make them, perform on revenue. But I don't think that end of the spectrum is the best way. But I think somewhere in the middle, where there's a little bit more shared accountability, I guess is the best way to put it, and best practices. So that's kind of my thoughts on that piece. The other element, though, that I think is super important, that I see a lot in companies, is that there is this sales versus marketing kind of, I have my reports and here's how we're performing and here's how you're performing, and then the other team has, it's very much, there's those silos. I think having some type of, whether it's sales ops, sales excellence, enablement, whatever you want to call it, but I think having some type of, we'll call it a third party, someone who's not tied necessarily to either result, but maybe just the end big result, being able to objectively look at the end-to-end performance and just being able to say, because look, at the end of the day, marketing and sales, no matter what company, there's things they can optimize and do better. So I think having that kind of mindset is also, critical to create the communication and collaboration. So
I think that's a great answer, and it's a very nuanced issue, right? And it's going to be dependent upon your organization, upon your clients, upon the industry that you work in. I know that for me, though, what really resonated with me is the idea of just breaking down that silo and just getting people on the same page. In my organization, which isn't large, the sales and marketing team, you're almost looking at the extent of it. And yet, I'm still obviously looking at these metrics and trying to figure out, how do we optimize things? And one of the things that really, smacks me in the face is that a lot of our business is coming through referral, whether that be from our customers or from other partners or from Salesforce itself. And our close rates are very high and our deal cycle is very fast. But the reason is because there's other people that are doing all of the work before we ever even talk to someone.
Yep.
So if we get a lead that's maybe generated off of LinkedIn via a video like this as an example, it's going to take a lot longer for us to convince someone to sign a contract with us, and we're going to have a lot lower success rate. Does that mean that LinkedIn is not a viable option? Not necessarily, but I think that we have to weigh those two things against each other and say, okay, as I grow my company and I start to invest in additional resources, whether they be in sales or marketing, I need to take that into account and not just say, okay, our close rate is 35%, and so if I generate leads on LinkedIn, I need a 35% close rate or we're failing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's it's a really good example, because large, small, whatever the case is, every company is trying to figure those things out. There's so many different channels to be on. I think things like LinkedIn and having a voice is definitely the future and the direction where a lot of sales and marketing is definitely going. But I think the other element of it is that you got to look at the metrics that matter, right? You have to be able to look at metrics. There's some really good vanity feel good metrics, I do this to this day, right? But it's I'll post something on LinkedIn and the first thing is how many likes or reactions did I get?
Yep.
And it's that doesn't really matter. What really matters is either going to be things like your views, which is another kind of vanity feel good thing, but to an extent, I judge it by how many people just will message me and just be hey, awesome post, super was having a bad day and it kind of picked me up or gave me great insight, or I use this, it was super helpful, thank you. That's kind of the stuff to me that is super impactful. So when you're trying to figure this out on different channels, no one channel operates the same and behaves the same for sure. Conversions can be rapidly different where you go. But then at the same time, it's you said referrals are amazing. It's well, how can you scale that, right? Is there a way you can kind of lean into that more and then continue to figure out the LinkedIn stuff where that can kind of take you a little bit further? It's all a balance, and it's all just kind of figuring it out as you go, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think that, if we take LinkedIn as an example, you do have these vanity metrics and you compare that to real metrics such as, actual revenue close. And at the same time, some of it is immeasurable, right? Yeah. So, given that, we're very focused on referrals. So when I run into the Salesforce office and run into a Salesforce rep, or I go meet with another vendor like SalesLoft as an example, and maybe they want to, send a customer my way, is that because I took them to lunch, or because I sent them a personalized email? Or is that because they saw the last 5 videos that I posted to LinkedIn? Or is it both? That's really difficult to measure, but when you're getting constant feedback from people saying, hey, I saw what you were doing on this social channel, or I saw that white paper that you published, or whatever marketing you're doing, there's some value there that you may not be able to measure perfectly.
And so I think of it that way, where there are going to be, because you are attacking, I don't want to say the word attacking, but you are reaching out to people from multiple channels, right? And there's going to be the social stuff that's very, very immeasurable. There's going to be sending them, some treats, some bagels, donuts, something, right? Or it's going to be a call, or whatever the case is. Some of it's not measurable, right? So I think you got to use your intuition, and you got to start doing a lot of things and start, the things that you feel really good about that are having an impact, just keep doing them. Then there's going to be other things that you'd be man, I think this was a complete waste of time. And then you just kind of cut those things. But it's always a balance and juggling game. But I think with where we are today, you can, if there's a channel to get in front of somebody. So let's just specifically from a sales perspective, right? There's the whole cold calling is dead thing, right? No, it's a channel. Why would you eliminate a channel, right? Even if you don't know, someone got back to you, was it your voicemail, your cold call, your email, the thing you sent them, your post on LinkedIn? You're not going to know, but by doing all of that is going to culminate results over a long period of time versus that immediate, how do I get you? Because how you got that one person is going to be very different than how you got that other person.
Yep.
So I think it's just, you got to be able to look a little bit more macro on those things and figure it out over time.
Well, I think it's interesting that you bring up CrossFit, because I've done a lot of it as well. But, I don't consider myself a CrossFitter. And I am the epitome of what, as a CrossFitter, what you would not want as a sales rep, in that I show up and I just go through the routine, right? My mentality is, I'm paying for a class, I'll show up, I'll do what you tell me to do, I'm there for the hour, I'll do my best, and I leave it all there. And I think on the whole, it keeps me a pretty healthy person. I think that I'm probably definitely in the upper 50% of health in the country of the United States of America. But when I go to my CrossFit gym, I'm dead last every single time. And the things that I notice that are different about the way that I approach it and the way others approach it is, a lot of them are measuring their workout of the day. They're measuring their success against the last time they did that same workout and trying to beat their own time. I don't do that. And the other thing is that they're usually measuring like what they're eating. And so again, I'm not trying to beat my time the last time I did that workout, and I don't really care that much if I go out on a Friday night and have a few slices of pizza. So it shouldn't be surprising that I come back in on Monday morning and those guys are kicking my butt.
Yeah.
And I think that doing those two things, what it does is it starts to open up all these other conversations of like, should I be using olive oil or should I be using coconut oil? Should I be doing this? Should I be taking, this vitamin or this thing or the other? And you may not know exactly what is going to produce the desired result, but you can see that the things combined produce a difference. Yep. And there's a reason why, I go to the CrossFit gym for 2 years and then I'm still dead last. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't want a sales rep that comes in and that's their job, that's their profession, to approach their work in the same way, right?
But I'm sure too, if you, and this is the other element of it, and we have a lot of like junior reps on, and I've managed a ton of junior reps, and to really go all in on your profession is kind of a new concept for them, right? But if that was paying your bills at the end of the day, you'd probably treat it differently, right?
Yeah.
That's like a fun thing for you to do that keeps you healthy, and like that's amazing. Like you said, you're doing a lot more than probably most people out there. But I think for no matter when you're looking at it as a profession, and you're looking at it as something that's you're going to build a career around, right? It's going to essentially provide you, hopefully, an amazing, fantastic life, because that's what I think sales can do for a lot of people. I think you got to treat it differently. Like you got to get in the weeds. You got to look at every little thing possible, and then it won't all be measurable. But like I said, you got to trust your gut. You got to use your intuition, and you got to continue to do a lot of the things that you think are working for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that some of the best sales reps that I've seen, you have this concept of management, of sales operations, which we didn't touch on explicitly, but indirectly. You have all of these analytics, and you have a group of people that are coming to sales reps and saying, here is feedback on what you're doing. Similar to the way that in CrossFit, you're measuring a couple different metrics and then trying to make sense of it. Most salespeople, especially the really good ones, are very intuitive and natural. You don't have to tell them how to walk into a room and build relationships. That comes naturally to those people, and I've yet to sit through a training where anybody's told me how to be better at that.
Yeah.
It's the mechanics of the day-to-day of how do I go through my account list and figure out who I should call first? How do I make the sales cycle move faster? Things like that. And I think that those reps that are really after it, there was a post that I saw the other day where it's, that person is out at happy hour with 2 of their colleagues, and all 3 of them are people that really want it. They're not the people that are, complaining about their jobs. They're the people that really want it. And what are they doing over those drinks? They're comparing notes. They're talking about the things that they experienced in those calls that day, the feedback they got from their manager, the feedback they got from the metrics that are shared with them. And each one of them is going to approach it differently. Each one of them has their own methodology. Maybe they went to Sandler sales training and they're like, hey, the mutual plan's a good idea, but I do things a little differently my way. But they ultimately find a path that works for them.
Yeah, I think, to that point, the best reps, for a lot of them, it comes fairly naturally. But I think, and others really have to work at it, right? And that's just like being a student. Some people are just naturally smart and studying is easy. I really had to work at it, right? That was me. But I think that the 2 common themes is just someone who's a student of the game, right? Someone who is sharing knowledge, talking feedback, understanding hey, this was kind of how I performed my discovery. What are you doing? And whether you're learning from your colleagues, a mentor, training. But then I also think the other element of it is just this no excuses mentality, right? The people that are coming in and this is what I got to hit, and I'm going to find a way. And because your path to success as a salesperson, mine, and that person are all going to be very, very differently. So finding out what your path to success is huge.